at least here in the United States, and I think probably everywhere. That's got people a little upset because we got this thing, the First Amendment. You may be penalized afterwards for the consequences of what you say, but nobody's supposed to be able to exercise speech control. And you would think that the place where you would be least likely to attempt such a thing would be in the writing community, people who are accustomed to expressing themselves with words. I suspect we will hear from the Authors Guild and other organizations about this, but in the meantime, I would encourage anybody, freelancers, anybody, to not sign a contract that has this clause in it. Stick up for your brethren here. Just draw a line through this clause. Last time I reported about the so-called National Emergency Library that is creating and distributing eBooks without the permission of the authors. That's continued to attract attention. Even a U.S. senator now has openly questioned the legality of this operation. The archive's founder, Brewster Kahle, has defended the library, saying that this falls within the fair use provisions of American intellectual property law, and saying that they haven't done any books published in the past 5 years. Well, to me, as a former lawyer who is not at any time, I guess technically I'm still a lawyer, aren't I? I just don't practice. The point is I am not offering legal advice to you or anyone else. I would never do that. I'm not your lawyer, but the idea that you can publish a whole book and say that's fair use, no way. And the fact that they haven't published any books published in the past 5 years, who cares? The copyright law in this country goes way longer than 5 years. That's like a non-answer. The question is, did he seek the permission from the creators before they started creating this so-called emergency library? And the answer is that they didn't. Kahle has said that if anybody requests that they take down their work, they will. Well, this makes them equivalent to those people on the internet who give illegal BitTorrents that allow people to download your work. Yeah, if you complain, they'll take it down, and the next day there'll be 5 more of them. It's a no-win deal. You shouldn't have to affirmatively reach out and say, hey, stop violating my copyright. This is something no one should be doing in the first place. Okay, happier news. Congratulations to Threa Almontezer. I probably mispronounced your last name, and I apologize, but who cares? This author won the 2020 Walt Whitman Award for her poetry manuscript titled The Wild Fox of Yemen, and that is a huge event. The book is going to be published later this year by Grey Wolf Press, certainly one of the best poetry publishers in the United States. The award comes with a residency period in Italy and a $5,000 prize. Congratulations, Threa. For that matter, Conclave, the literary magazine published by the Balkan Press, which is run by my wife and I, has announced its winners, which will appear in the next issue, which will come out next month. So congratulations to Brendan Pranowitz, whose short story Cardboard Salvation won the first place prize. I've had a chance to read this, and let me tell you, it is a spectacular piece of work. I'll tell you more about Conclave next month when the issue hits the stands. Speaking of reaching out to other people in the community during times of crisis, there is help out there, and please help me pass the word to people who may need to hear it. Poets and Writers, for instance, has a relief fund that is limited to its members. PEN America, on the other hand, offers grants to writers, and you do not have to be a member of the organization to apply. Speaking of Australia, Scott Byatt, my correspondent, Australia's copyright agency offers support for artists of all kinds, and that includes writers. They've got an emergency action fund of $150,000 they're going to be distributing. And my pal Jane Friedman, who will be the guest of honor this year at WriterCon, has compiled an updated list of places writers, and other creatives can find financial help during the crisis. You can find that on her website under the coronavirus news section. Most of these grants are small, like $500 or $1,000, but a little goes a long way when you're hurting. And because these grants are small, they can be paid much more quickly. So if you know somebody who needs that kind of help, please tell them about it. Remember, there's a reason why we want to be part of this community. Writers, creative people, as I said before. I think writers have always represented the best of humanity. Writers have always been the one who led the way, reached out their arms, reminded everybody that you are not alone. And now, more clearly perhaps than ever in recent memory, writers need to remind one another, need to remind everybody that we are all in this together. In my writing tips section, I'm going to answer the question which has been posed to me more often than any other in these past 2 weeks, and that is, should I write about the coronavirus crisis? In the previous podcast, I suggested, indirectly, that this is possibly not the time. For one thing, I thought a lot of people would be doing it, so it'd be a crowded market. And two, I thought, who would want to read about that right now? It is just possible I was wrong. I know, it's never happened before, but maybe just this once. Clearly, people are writing about it. I even dropped a mention of the coronavirus in my book that's coming out soon, Twisted Virus. It's just a passing reference I dropped into the galleys, but still, it's there. I guess in my mind, this book takes place in sort of an alternate history future where this crisis is already passed so people can get around and talk to one another. But there are books out there, and they are selling already, dealing with this pandemic, and I have to assume there will be more in the months to come. There's a book called Coronavirus, a book for children, which, to be fair, is available free. It's a children's book, obviously. The first 24 hours after it went up, the book was accessed over 100,000 times. And that was not at Amazon. That was at the publisher's website. 100,000 accesses in the first 24 hours. There's a more fun article at the Guardian website, that's a UK newspaper, talking about how indie authors are basically rushing to market with what they call lockdown erotica. Well, do I really have to explain what that's about to you? I mean, people are stuck at home and presumably within the same self-quarantine don't have to stay 6 feet apart from one another. If you want to smile, go check out the covers. The titles alone are pretty amazing. Sex During the Coronavirus Pandemic is one, and another, The Physical Manifestation of Washing My Hands Gets Me Off. And you're probably listening to this thinking, oh, he's chosen the most provocative titles to read in the podcast. No, I have not. Far from it. If you want to know more, go read the article yourself. But there are books dealing with this out there already that are not just erotica. There are self-help quarantine dating books, children's stories, investment guides, workout manuals, parenting books, but a whole lot of erotica. So, should you write about this when so many other people are going to do it, and when so many people may not want to think about it right now? At least one writer thinks you should. Valeria Lucelli has said that writers have an obligation to document the pandemic, presumably for future generations. Quote, I think it is my duty, and the duty of every writer, whether a science fiction writer, a journalist, a poet, each at their own pace and within their own capacities, to document this moment. That may be true. I still have to wonder, though, if the best work is going to come from a distance, after people have had more time to process their emotions and the meaning of this experience. And I've never been a fan of people writing to the market. I think you do your best writing when you write what's in your heart. You write what you care about. Maybe that is this pandemic, but maybe there's something else that's calling your name with a little bit more power and passion. My interview, which we're about to get to, I promise, with Steve Berry, I mean, how did he become the titanic success he is today? Because he had a passion for history. He loved history, so he made that the focus of his work. Yes, they're thrillers, so of course he had the sense to choose a powerful, popular genre, but infused all those books with his passion, history, and that's why he's sold 25 million books worldwide now. Ask yourself, what's your passion? Because that's what you should be writing about. I've had the pleasure of knowing Steve Berry and his wife Liz, who's been on the podcast before, for more than a decade now, and I can tell you he's not only a terrific writer, he's one of the best people I've ever had the pleasure of knowing in my life. But even before I met him face to face, I was very aware of Steve because I was reading his books and seeing them every time I went to the bookstore. Because like every other egomaniacal author, I go in a bookstore and go first to see if your books are on the shelf. And of course, Berry, Berry, comes alphabetically just after Bernhardt, Bern, and so forth. And so at first I would see his book, then books, right after mine. And then as time passed, actually as very quickly, those Berry books started squeezing the Bernhardt books into the corner. And there was a reason for that, because he is a fantastic writer. 25 million books in 51 different countries. His series character, Cotton Malone, is one of the best known and most popular characters worldwide. As we talked, his latest book, The Warsaw Protocol, was number 2 on the New York Times-bestseller list. He has so much true wisdom to offer writers. Here's what he had to say. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here, Bill.
All right, traditional first question. If you could offer one piece of advice to an aspiring writer, what would it be?
Listen to the little voice that's in your head telling you to write, and write every day.
I think a lot of people hear that voice, but how do you actually make yourself sit down and write?
Well, you have to. It takes discipline. Writing is a discipline. It's not an obsession. You don't get obsessed with it, but it truly is a discipline. You have to determine, what's your best time of day? When are you most productive? For me, it's in the morning time. So I always set aside 2 hours every morning. I went to my law office at 7 o'clock and I wrote from 7 to 9 every single morning. This is before I was published. Writing manuscripts. You find the time when you're most productive. You sit yourself down, you listen to the little voice, and you keep going. Now, you get asked all the time, why do you write? You write because you have to. If you don't, the little voice will drive you insane. And I've been at it now 30 years, and the little voice still drives me insane all the time. So the best advice to a writer is listen to the little voice, get a routine, stick to it, and try to write your words, try to write some words every day.
I'm not sure everybody has the same degree of discipline that you do. I remember hearing you speak once, and you attributed nuns at a Catholic school where you were educated for instilling discipline.
Yeah, I went to Catholic school for the first 7 years, and the nuns taught me discipline because you really didn't. I mean, if you came in without your homework, you only came once without your homework. You never did it again. They were tough now. But the way it is that, when I hear writers say that all the time, it all depends on what you want to do. A lot of people don't know my story. I guess I should say it very quickly. From the day I wrote my first word to the day I sold my first word was 12 years.